Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Hook Turn podcast with my friend Sanviv. How are you tonight, Sanviv?
I'm very good. I've seen that we've got some new listeners from Vietnam, so I just wanted to welcome them.
Yeah, so we have to say we're not sure how we have listeners from Vietnam because, to be honest, none of our content is specifically targeted towards the Vietnamese market or audience, but we were checking our analytics and yeah, I think when was the day? Was it the 7th of July? I think that was the day
Yeah,
we randomly had this spike from Vietnam, according to the Spotify Creators app. So we don't know whether somebody has randomly discovered our podcast and has somehow disseminated it to the Vietnamese car enthusiast community or or whatever, or if it's just some scam or what it is. But you know,
I choose to believe that we've just got a passionate Vietnamese following, so thank
yeah,
you to those people.
I would also like to believe that, and I don't know, maybe in our next episode we should talk more about VinFast or something, Sandeep.
Yes, absolutely need to cater our content to our
Yeah,
new listeners.
and I don't know, is it VinFast is are they actually sold? Actually, now we can go on a tiny bit of a tangent. Are they actually? They're not sold in Australia, right? Like
No,
they're
no, they're not. They're not sold
yeah,
in Australia. Yeah,
yeah. Because I remember that
they briefly, or do they still own the Lang Lang Proving Ground?
I think they briefly owned it and then they got rid of it. So
All right.
I'm not sure why they owned it. Like because maybe I think they had some intention to test vehicles or
Yeah, yeah.
sell
They bought it
vehicles.
in September 2020 and then sold it in October 2021. So they had it for like a year.
Okay, well, I think that probably says all you need to know. That probably says a lot about VinFast's business approach to randomly buy a test track and then get rid of it a year later. Yeah, anyway, I think they did try to sell in America, right? And they were called like the worst brand in America or
That's
something.
correct. Yes.
But anyway, look, welcome to our new Vietnamese audience. If there's anyone listening from Vietnam, yeah, we're keen to have you on board, and thank you for tuning in. So, yeah, look, let's get started on our three topics. So we have one vehicle which we are, it is another Chinese EV. So we're on a streak now. Well, on a 2 episode streak. So, but I think both of us were like we know that Chinese models are known for their very sharp pricing, but I think this sort of pleasantly surprised, well, both of us, even for a Chinese model, how sharp the pricing is, especially with what you're getting. Then we have two other cars that we're talking about. One of them is also an EV, and the other one is a more conventionally powered option, but also potentially a bit of a good value for money option in the Australian market if it comes. So let's get started with our first topic, which is the 2026 Geely EX2. So for those who don't know, Geely is a recent entrant into the Australian market under its own name, and Geely are actually the parent company of a lot of more famous brands. So they own Volvo, they own Polestar, they own Lotus as well, and they also own Zeekr, which is positioned as a more premium Chinese brand. I think that's fair to say, Sandeep.
That is definitely correct. Yes, out of all the Chinese brands so far, it's probably there are some people who effectively see it on par with like Lexus and Mercedes and BMW. It's the closest that
Yeah.
you're going to get from the Chinese brands to that. Denza, I guess, but Denza, the B5 and the B8, I guess, have a much more niche target audience than the 7X, and so
Yeah.
therefore haven't been able to get the same reach.
Yeah. But I think the Geely branded vehicles are positioned as more of an affordable sort of Chinese option.
And
They're
the
more.
EX5 has been selling quite well as well. The
Oh,
Geely
okay.
EX5,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's been selling quite well for them.
Yeah.
They're and Geely are in I think sold 10,000 vehicles already over 2020. through like over halfway through 2026.
Hmm.
So they're doing quite well in the Australian marketplace,
Yeah,
which is really good.
yeah, that's really good. Yeah, definitely. Look, it might be another success story, but let's see how we go. It's still early days, but um, I think it's fair to say that the Geely branded models are designed to be sort of more value focused than Zeekr or any of the other Geely brands. So more directly positioned to compete with like Chery and there's some of the other Chery brands, so Omoda, JQ, MG, be like the standard sort of BYD brands, although I suspect that they're positioned to be even more value conscious than BYD. Although I don't think there's a huge um, amount of play or difference between the two in terms of a pure value perspective. But the model we want to talk about now in this episode is the Geely EX2, which is their entry level model. It's essentially a hatch, although it looks a little bit more like a SUV, so it's maybe a slightly with the black cladding and everything. But I think what's interesting is what you are getting for the price. So very good pricing. So you have the EX2 Complete, which is despite the complete despite it being branded as a complete, is 26,490 before on road. And then you have the uh a higher spec Inspire, which is 3990 before on road. So um look, I think the complete look, that is a bit of like a I think what's the best way to frame it? Like it's a very attractive price point, but when you start looking at the specifications, yes, it has a lot of features, but the actual powertrain only 60 kilowatt motor and a 30 kilowatt hour battery with a WLTP range of 235 kilometers. So that real world range is probably going to be maybe 180, 190 kilometers. That that's very low power as well. 60 kilowatts is, but basically it will be enough to get you up to like motorway speeds and maybe what, 12 or 13 or 14 seconds. So very slow. So I would be hesitant to go for that one. But the Inspire is where it gets, like much more attractive in terms of the powertrain because that has an 85 kilowatt motor, a 47.1 kilowatt hour battery, and a WLTP range of 345 kilometers. So realistically, I suspect you'd get maybe 300 kilometers. And I think that higher spec one for the price, so maybe an extra 4 grand is quite a very sort of reasonable price. What's more interesting is some of the other specifications. So you get rear wheel drive, which is very interesting. At this price point, a lot of the competitors, so the MG4 Urban, um, what's the what's the other sort of direct competitor? The BYD Dolphin and the GAC Ion UT, which I think both of the MG and the GAC we've covered in previous episodes. They're both front wheel drive. So this is rear wheel drive, which in my opinion is the right way for EVs to be powered. Like rear wheel drive is a more efficient setup. It's not a it's not a sports car by any means, but I think it means that the front wheels don't get overwhelmed with excessive like torque steer or anything else. So it's a little bit more stable with the driving as well. And another benefit of that is that you get a tighter turning circle, which is really handy for those tight urban environments. I believe the turning circle is 9.9 meters, which is really good. That's very impressive, and makes it much more easy to do U-turns, which is especially in Melbourne where you have a lot of U-turns, very handy. And you also get a frunk, which is and this is a 70-liter frunk. So that's for this size of car, that's huge. That's comparatively huge because you look at other models like even the BMW iX3, which is a world away in terms of like size and pricing and everything. built on a dedicated EV platform, but only gets, I think, 58 liters of uh, front boot space or front space. So this has a larger front and is like, like almost like 15% of the price or something. So that's very and much smaller vehicle as well. So that size front is really, really impressive. And you get independent suspension. So most cars at this price point use torsion beam, which is a simpler, more compact setup. The benefits of a multi-link independent suspension are there's greater rear wheel articulation, greater bump isolation, and the ride quality will likely be smoother and a little bit more sophisticated as well. So I think those are really interesting benefits of this model at such a low price point from a mechanical perspective. Now, Sandra, did you want to cover off on like some of the features and, do you think this is going to be competitive against like the MG and some of the more BYD and the GAC, which are also, also pretty decent value for money?
I think that the success that Geely has had with the EX5 should
Hmm.
translate to this. We actually know that there's a good market for these sorts of small cars. Now, it isn't as big as a market for small SUVs, which is why after the Tesla Model Y, C Line 7, the BYD Atto 2 is the third best-selling EV right now in Australia in during the first half of 2026, because people, even in the cheaper price brackets, still want a SUV over a hatchback. So that's why the
Yeah.
Atto 2 has been very successful for BYD. But in saying that, we know that the MG4 has had a good customer base. I've actually seen the Atto 1 going around quite as well. And
Mm.
while the GAC Ion UT hasn't, I haven't seen as much of it. I'm sure there are people who've bought it. And the
Yeah.
reality is that GAC doesn't have the same marketing budget that Geely does. So Geely EX5, you can see the ads everywhere. So if Geely push the EX2 as hard as they push the EX5, it won't be as successful as the EX5 simply because, as I mentioned, Australians simply like SUVs more than they do hatch, but
Mm.
it should be quite good. The fact that it was the best-selling car in China last year, altogether best-selling vehicle, not even just the best-selling EV, nearly
Well,
half a
yeah.
million units sold, it actually shows. And Chinese customers are actually quite discerning nowadays. It's not like
Yeah.
20 years ago, right? Chinese customers are probably more discerning, I suspect, than Australian customers because it's got so many options.
Mm.
So if the Chinese are buying this en masse, there's probably something really good to it. In
Yeah.
saying this, what do we have now? We've got effectively four options in this price bracket. You got the BYD Atto 1. The
Mm.
BYD Dolphin's not quite in the sense it's a bit more expensive than these cars.
Mm.
Yeah, so it's a BYD Atto 1, the MG 4 EV Urban, and the
Mm.
GSC Ion UT. Out of all of those, unless if your budget is like really low, I think you can discount the Atto 1. Not that it's
Yeah.
a terrible car, but really it is urban runabout as urban runabouts can be. It really is literally going to the shops and back kind of car we're talking.
Yeah.
So, so I'd say I discount that one. Then out of the other three, the EX2, MG4 Urban, and the Ion UT. The Ion UT on paper looks the best. It's
Yeah.
got by far the largest range, 430 kilometers, which is significantly more than
Yeah.
even the EX2. Even the top variant of the EX2 only comes with
And it's
345. So
cheaper as well because it's 31,990 drive away. So like overall it's cheaper
it's
than
cheaper, correct?
yeah.
Yes. However, all the reviews said, and we've said it too, apparently it is like Chinese EVs are not as sophisticated as Korean and Japanese and German. But
Yeah.
even within Chinese EVs, the GAC Ion is really unsophisticated. Like
Yeah.
even MG and BYD are far better tuned.
Yeah.
So really, on paper, the Ion UT sounds good, but in reality, I suspect, yes, you'll get more driving range, but I suspect you're going to make a lot of compromises with your day-to-day,
Mm.
um, the day-to-day driving experience. Now, obviously, you can say that a lot of these can be tweaked with updates, but I feel like GAC won't be as good with updates as bigger companies like MG, Geely, and BYD are. There
Yeah.
might be one or two tweaks, but broadly speaking, I suspect it won't be the case. So I'd actually discount that as well, because unless if range is your only factor, which if you're buying in this category, No one is buying a car, EV hatchback looking to do like interstate drives, right? You're buying a car in this category, you're doing it so you can go to work and back, you can just do your daily driving. And in that case, 300, a range in the 300s is more than enough, right? Even if a range in the 300s means you might have to charge at most once every 5 days or so.
Mm.
So really, then it comes down to the Geely EX2 and the MG4 Urban. Now, here is where I can't make a decision until I read the EX2 reviews, the local reviews. I'm
Yeah.
sure, given that the EX5 is actually quite a solid car, I'm sure that the EX2 will be a solid car.
Mm.
In saying that, then you basically got a range. The MG4 top spec range, driver weighs 35K, but you get 405 kilometers of range.
Mm.
The X2's um, not that much cheaper, maybe 2,000
Yeah.
less after on-road costs, but then you're getting 345 kilometers of range.
Yeah.
So there's a fair bit of a difference. I also would say that MG for urban EV, it's already actually got quite good reviews.
Yeah. That's
So
true.
yeah, it's already got quite good reviews. So I would suggest that it is, and MG is much more established in Australia, at least compared to Geely. But again, I'd wait to see the reviews of the EX2. So I'm not going to suggest either or.
Yeah.
What I will say is that and the other big thing is that at that price, you can actually get a used EV that is a bit more practical. You can actually get uh, quite an old Tesla Model 3 for
You could.
roughly
Yeah.
low 30s,
Yeah.
or some of those other Korean early gen EVs like the Kona Electric, the
Yeah.
Nero EV, etc. So, and 20 those models from early 2020s probably still have pretty good range, probably more practical than this car. So yeah, yeah. But the other interesting thing is that in this specific category, it's all Chinese EVs basically, right? Literally what I've just listed. I've listed Geely, BYD,
Yeah.
MG, and GAC, all Chinese. So
Yeah.
it seems like if you want a car in this category, a cheap, fully EV hatchback, Chinese are your only options at this point,
Yeah.
effectively. So
Yeah.
that's also quite interesting as well. That the Honda Super One EV is coming out, but that's like as like that's I'm not exactly like it's a cool car in concept, but really practically you're not going to look at that as a practical car.
Yeah, the
So
Honda
yeah,
Super One is like even, I mean, it's in a different, like, that's essentially a
but it
K
will
car.
probably be priced almost in line with these
Yeah,
cars. I don't think it'll be much cheaper.
that's why I'm so curious to see how Honda price it, because I feel like if they price the Honda Super One at like above 30 grand, it's kind of like dead on arrival. Like
Yeah, absolutely.
surely it has to be under 20 under, sorry, not under 20, but under 30 grand. Like, and not just under 30 grand, like significantly under 30 grand, like 26, 27 max. Like it can't be, yeah, if it's like 32 grand plus on, like Honda do drive away pricing. So yeah, it can't be above 30 grand. It's because it's a much smaller car. The range of the Honda Super One like won't be competitive with any of these. Like I think it's the same range as the entry level BYD Atto one. So the entry level BYD Atto one for 23,990, you get 220 kilometers of range. I reckon the Honda Super One will probably have a similar type of range to that, like probably 220 kilometers or something like that as well. But but for around 30 grand, that's not competitive. So it needs to be below 30 grand. And it's just a much tinier car. Like you're really trading on the Honda brand with that model if it's above 30 grand at that point. Um, yeah, but I think Sam, if I do agree with you with these four models, it's very like tough competition. But I think yeah, the MG4 Urban, that's probably the strongest competitor. And yeah, MG's had just a lot more experience in the Australian market. They have probably better after sales offer with their 10-year warranty and just more dealerships and so on and so forth. I think the thing to note with the MG, like some of the reviews have been saying that tech is still not like it's getting better, but like things like by tech, I mean like the performance of the infotainment system and stuff, it's still a little bit laggy. So maybe Geely might be a little bit better there, but that's also TBC because we haven't seen like the proper reviews of the Geely. So I think this is another example where you're going to have to sit in both cars, drive both, and then look at what your preference is. But I am impressed by the mechanical specification because it's very rare to get a car with the front and rear wheel drive and all of these like cool sort of features that you can get with more expensive EVs in this price segment. So yeah, I think it's definitely very, very sharp pricing, and you never know, maybe Geely in the future might do a drive away deal at that same price, although they haven't announced anything like that at this stage. Yeah. Sandra, would you consider what would be your pick? I guess you mentioned that you would have to sit inside both, but like sort of gun to your head, what would you decide out of the four models we talked about?
Well, as I said, the GAC and BYD is out. Out of
Yeah,
the two, oh, I'd probably go probably the top spec MG for urban
yeah,
EV.
fair
Yeah.
enough. Fair enough. Yeah. Yeah, I might take a punt and say the top spec, the Geely EX2, but yeah, I think the MG is very good value for money for what you're that 34,990, and it's like the performance is just in terms of the power output and so on is I think significantly greater than the Geely as well. So that's just something else to note there too. Okay, look, shall we move on to our next topic?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, let's do that. So now from a very entry level EV to a very high performance EV. So we have the all new Mercedes AMG CLA 45, which is now a fully electric car. And actually, maybe just to touch on that, Sam, were you surprised they didn't go with like some plug-in hybrid option, given, we've talked so much about the limited demand for performance EVs, and the CLA is available as a combustion engine car as well. Are you surprised they stuck with a full EV for the AMG model?
I suspect plug-in hybrid may have come with more compromises.
Yeah.
So they probably thought it wasn't worth it. Also, I suspect when this car started development, they were sort of still developing under the assumption of the strict new rules
Mm.
um, about sort of mandated EVs. So yeah, I think that, and ultimately, while yes, performance EVs are still a very niche sort of thing, it is they will still be around. So it
Yeah.
makes sense for Mercedes to offer one.
Yeah, fair enough. Some of the stats are quite for this model are quite like insane, like I have to has to be said. So you're getting peak, so I emphasize that's a peak output of 500 kilowatts and 1,759 Newton meters of torque. So that torque figure is absolutely crazy. And that enables a acceleration of 3 seconds from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour. So that's, faster than the Tesla Model 3 performance. That's really quick. And that's despite this car weighing 2.3 tons. So it weighs quite a bit, but it's also very, very quick. So that's, frankly, in some insane acceleration figures. And Mercedes is also saying if you use the American standard, which is you have a quote unquote 1 foot rollout, you can do that same sprint in 2.7 seconds. So that's very interesting. And it still has a 94 kilowatt hour battery, so larger than the ones in the standard CLA. And that gives a driving range of 640, between 640 to 670 kilometers. So, that's actually pretty solid given how much all the performance that you're getting and the battery capacity. That's quite solid range. And I think just apart from the specs, because we know that EVs have really good acceleration and so on. It's other things to note. There's three electric motors, so all-wheel drive. That's all expected. But what's interesting is how they've tried to replicate some of those combustion engine sounds. So they're using what is being called synthesized gear shifts and engine sounds, but they're not trying to replicate a V8 this time. They're trying to replicate the 2-liter turbo petrol engine of the outgoing CLA 45. So I think they made what they're claiming more than 1,600 detailed measurements of the sound and all of that, and how the gear shifts happened in the outgoing model. And they tried to sort of replicate that feeling in this Mercedes in this EV. So that's quite interesting. It's similar to the approach conceptually to what Hyundai has done with the Ioniq 5N and the 6N, and then also Porsche sort of introduced that with the latest update to the Taycan. So yeah, it's interesting that conceptually that they're going to that. The CLA, I think it goes even one step further because they have essentially speakers in the front seat. So they're calling them seat shakers, and that also gives authentic vibrations in normal drive modes or a combustion engine like vibration in the AMG Force S Plus mode. So lots of mumbo jumbo there, but basically it tries to simulate the vibration of a that you get from a combustion engine. So that's yeah, interesting. Sam, what are your thoughts on the design and all of these fancy simulated driving experiences and so on?
I think the design looks very clean, but nothing overly special.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just looks clean. I'm sure at night it will look amazing, particularly the rear.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just looks like a clean design. Interior wise, however, like all Mercedes, I really like. I'm sure the interior quality is amazing, but even in photos, it really looks so plain.
Yeah.
I feel like there are mainstream EVs that have nicer looking interiors than what Mercedes is doing with this interior. So yeah, but the reality is that um the performance is the main thing here. Now, as you mentioned, the market for this will be interesting because it's still an extremely pricey car, not that practical. And while extremely quick, again, the reality is that 3 seconds, while obviously incredibly fast,
Mm.
it's not that much quicker than what you can probably get in any EV that could be much cheaper than this, basically. Um, so we already know cars like the Tesla Model 3 performance and stuff, they're not as quick, but they're still extremely quick.
Mm.
And in some ways, they could be even better sort of buy than this car. Now, in saying that, you're like, yeah, I guess it's very impressive engineering, but I just am curious to see basically who would be interested in buying this. The one good thing is, unlike a lot of performance EVs, they have not compromised on the range.
Mm.
So it's still got an extremely good range, 670 kilometers, which is extremely impressive, especially for a premium car. Because, sorry, especially for a performance EV, because we kind of know that your performance EVs often take the hit to range. Even the Model 3 performance, Model 3 is pretty much the benchmark for efficiency, and the Model 3 performance does 571
Yeah.
kilometers of range on the WLTP, which compared to the long range, normal standard long range, which does 750. So it's very impressive that Mercedes is able to offer this much power while still maintaining really, really good range. Also, 800-volt architecture and 330 kilowatts max charging speed, which basically means in Australia that's kind of irrelevant because, as we've spoken about before, there's like in the single digits
Yeah.
charging stations that support that speed. 99% of charging stations in Australia are capped at 150 kilowatts. So
Mm.
not very relevant for Australian customers, but obviously for international customers, that's very cool. Now, the other big thing is, do you think it's better than, well, some of the cars that we've spoken about, the Porsche Macan Turbo Electric? I can't imagine that a base model is that much more expensive than this, and it's a lot more practical, and it's a Porsche, right?
Yeah.
If you want to
Exactly.
go cheap, if you want to go slightly cheaper, a Hyundai Ioniq 5N.
Yeah.
Again, I would argue a cooler design. I would argue a cooler looking interior. Um,
Mm.
and
Even the
yeah, so
6N as well. Yeah.
even the 6N correct as well. We've said the Tesla Model 3 performance as well. So, um, and yeah, you're and then obviously you've got the new BMW M3 coming out, etc. That will be a significantly higher price bracket, I guess, so not
Yeah.
really comparable to this. But even then, it has got competitors. So it's interesting. As I said, while it's fast, I don't think there's anything extra special about it that I would be like, wow, this car looks especially cool, has especially cool interior. Um, like there's nothing extra special about it. It hasn't got the software of a Tesla either. It hasn't got the looks of an Ioniq 5N. Um, there's nothing so unique about it that you'll be like, oh, well, I'm going to spend 130, $140,000 on this versus any of the other competitors I could spend that much money. Like I
Yeah.
would probably buy a Tesla Model 3 Performance over this. If I was, I'd save a significant amount of money. I'd get insane amount. I'd get very similar performance. And yes, it won't drive as well, obviously. I'm not suggesting it will drive as well. Oh, actually, a Tesla Model 3 Performance is 3.1 seconds, 0 to 100. So it's only this, the AMG is only zero point 0.1 second faster.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not suggesting it's going to drive nearly as well, but a Tesla Model 3 Performance is $80,000. Okay, so I'd be like, for saving effectively $50,000 if it comes around the $130,000 mark, I'd be like, for 50K, I can get another car.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's like I'm not a huge fan of the like exterior design for the new CLA. Like it just looks a bit like you look at the front grille and it just looks like it's I don't know, it's like it's almost like grimacing or something. Like I'm not sure. Like it's like the front grille is like pushed too far forward, and then you have this like weird like sort of monobrow that you have the like it's not so much in the AMG version because I think they've gotten for the AMG version they've gotten rid of the front light bar and they've just made it like a black piece of plastic, which is a interesting design decision in its own sort of way because normally you'd expect there to be a front light bar in all but the most like entry level model, and they've gone the opposite direction where the most expensive model has gotten rid of the front light bar. So that anyway, that's a interesting, but it just like it's not a very resolved design at the front. Like it's like they have this like weird, like they've tried to have this weirdly wide like grill that doesn't need to be there because it's an AMG, and they're just overly excessive uh like the front bumper is just excessively curved, like it's just like too it doesn't like I don't know, it's just not a very cohesive design. It's probably the best way to frame it. It's just not attractive to me. So I actually think the Model 3 has a much more resolved and cleaner design at the front. And it's, this is just like, let's put this giant Mercedes grille that's unnecessary, but we want to bling it out and we want people to know that they're buying a Mercedes and driving a Mercedes. So we'll put this giant sort of like lit up grill that doesn't really need to be there, but it is what it is. I'm more interested to see like because they've come out with the CLA fairly recently. So I think the new generation CLA came out towards the end of last year. More recently, they've come out with the C class, which is technically one size larger and a step up in terms of luxury and comfort, but they haven't come out with the full AMG version of the C class yet. So I'm interested to see is how the CLA 45 will compare with the future AMG version of the CLA. Like, is that also going to be, how are they going to differentiate the performance between the two? Because this is already so quick. Like, there's not even that much difference performance wise, like practically between this AMG, CLA AMG, and what's the ultra performance, the AMG GT four door or whatever that old what's their four door ultra high end supercar called again? The AMG, is it the AMG GT or did they call it something?
I'm pretty sure it's AMG GT.
Yeah, the four-door one, which we also talked about and were frankly horrified by the design. But in terms of technically, it's a very impressive car. Like there's not that much difference performance-wise, practically between the two. So I wonder how the C class will fit in. Like, how is it gonna? It's like at this point you're sort of splitting hairs. Like, is the C class gonna be like slower than this because it's larger and even heavier, or how are they gonna differentiate the two? Do you have any thoughts on that, Sandvik?
So I was just looking, the AMG GT, even the base model is about $270,000. As you said, the design looks extremely awkward. Um, it really does not look very nice, but obviously
Yeah,
the performance is pretty amazing.
yeah,
Um, the C class, it would probably be in the AMG C class electric. As you said, I suspect it won't be any more powerful. It might be more luxurious.
yeah, yeah. And I expect like if this is, I anticipate, I mean, we're sort of just taking stabs in the dark with the pricing, but I would anticipate this is maybe what, 120, $130,000 at so it's and maybe the C class, the C63 AMG or whatever they end up calling it, that's probably going to be closer to the $200,000 mark. So maybe there's a 170, 180 grand in Australia, and then that leaves plenty of breathing space for future E-class AMG and this base model AMG GT, which is what 270K. So that's probably how I anticipate them pricing these models sort of relative to each other. But I guess it's a very like the hardware and the engineering is I'm sure is really impressive, but I'm just not sold on the design and the especially on the outside and the interior. Like again, same criticism with Mercedes, just screens, 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 and it's just getting a little bit old now. Like if I wanted more screens, I could just buy a Mazda 6E or CX6E or whatever Chinese EV. Like you need to have genuine craftsmanship. That's how you need to differentiate yourself. And I just don't see that in this interior from Mercedes, unfortunately. Sam, have any other comments on this?
No, just curious to see when it launches here next
Yeah,
year, who buys it?
yeah, exactly. That's
Who actually puts their money where their mouth is and actually purchases one of these? I'd like to meet these people.
yeah, yeah, and understand why they bought it. Okay, look, we might move on to our final topic, which is not an EV. So that's some bit of a change in pace. So the Dacia Striker. So Dacia is a Romanian brand, and uh, in Australia they're being sold as Renaults, and we have the Renault Duster, which is a Dacia in Europe. So it's sold as a Dacia Duster in Europe. Here it's sold as a Renault Duster. And the Striker is this brand's largest vehicle yet. So it's basically the best way to describe it is as a slightly smaller Subaru Outback. So designed to, it's still technically in the C segment. So direct rivals would be like the Skoda Octavia wagon, Volkswagen Golf, like those sorts of European sort of hatchbacks. And although the Octavia is potentially like a half step larger, so this is sort of Striker's more directly competing with the Octavia. And yeah, but this is more lifted. It's more like a dip positioned as like a rough and tumble car designed to compete with even like some SUVs in that same sort of segment with the higher ride height, but also has a sort of wagon shape. So, Sam, do you want to take us through the design a little bit? Like, I really like the design. I think it's much better resolved than the Outback, which is quite frightening to be frank, and just
Well, the previous generation Outback did look nice.
yeah. Well, I don't know. I feel like the Outback has been a bit weird looking for a while now, but yeah, the latest one especially, like it's just odd. But previous gen maybe a little bit more resolved. But yeah. But what are your? I mean, I think it looks very, I think the design is very well resolved. Like it looks like it has the black cladding in all the right places. It looks, you have this T-shaped lighting signature at the front and rear. It has, it looks very tough. I love the proportions. It has really good like rear haunches. Yeah, Sambit, what are your thoughts?
I don't think it looks terrible. I think it looks fine basically, and at the price they're planning to sell it in Europe, it probably looks quite good. The other big thing is it's a very button heavy, very traditional interior.
Yeah,
And obviously, as you mentioned, compared to the Outback, it certainly looks cleaner. Though, as I said, I did like the now, I guess, previous generation Outback, the 2020, the one that was introduced in 2022 or whatever.
yeah,
That design was actually quite good. They just ruined it with the current one.
yeah.
I guess in other than that, it's obviously it's not going to be sold here almost certainly. I suspect that
We don't
wagons
know,
here,
but yeah, yeah. I hope they
but
sell it here.
but we know that wagons here are probably not that popular anymore. Unfortunately, we kind of know that SUVs are where it's at, because obviously the length of this car is quite long as well. So that's the other big thing. So yeah, but it's a pretty nice looking car, and if it theoretically was ever sold in Australia, I guess it could do okay. But as I said, I feel like first the length of the car, it is like it's like it would make it more cumbersome in some ways to drive and park compared to an SUV.
Yeah,
So that's
4.62 meters. So I mean, it's not ultra long, but yeah, I kind of see where you're coming at. Like, but yeah.
yeah. Otherwise, yeah, it seems like an impressive car, and as I'm sure you'll talk about the engine, they've chosen to give a really smart engine combination.
Yeah, so well, let's touch on the powertrain. So there's three drivetrains. So you have the entry level model in Europe features a 103 kilowatt mild hybrid setup. So that's a 48-volt mild hybrid system mated to a 1.2 liter three-cylinder turbo engine. So that's I mean that's okay. And then you have uh I think you have a full hybrid setup. So you have what they're calling the hybrid 155. So that's an 81 kilowatt, 1.8 liter four-cylinder engine, made it to a 37 kilowatt electric motor. So I don't know if so the total output for this drivetrain is 114 kilowatts. So a little bit more powerful. And it's not an interestingly, even though it's a hybrid, it's not a CVT transmission. It's a electric transmission with four gears for the petrol engine and two for the electric motor. So that's six-speed automatic transmission basically. So that's interesting in its own right. And I think this is the powertrain where Dacia are claiming that you can do 80% of your running in electric only mode in urban areas. So that's you can mostly run on electric power if you're in, just going about town and so on. So that's interesting. And then you have the all-wheel drive powertrain. So the two we've talked about are front wheel drive. Then you have the hybrid 150 4x4. So that's another 103 kilowatt hour, sorry, not 100 kilowatt hour, 103 kilowatt mild hybrid system. So that's basically the entry level powertrain. Plus, you also have rare electric motors. So that's a 21 kilowatt and 87 Newton meter rare electric motor with a two-speed transmission on the rear axle. And the front wheels has a six-speed dual clutch transmission. So interesting setup. And the total power output of that one is 110 kilowatts. So less powerful than the hybrid 155, but it's uh, but it's all-wheel drive powertrain. So that's yeah, interesting setup, interesting range of combinations. Like you would expect the all-wheel drive powertrain to be more powerful and to be the, quote unquote the best powertrain, but it's actually power-wise, it's sort of in between the hybrid 155 and the entry-level powertrain. So that's interesting. And that all-wheel drive powertrain, you get five drive modes as well. So you get auto, eco, snow, mud, and then off-road drive mode. So that's yeah, that's Interesting. You with the interior, you also get what Dacia are calling these U-clip points, so just accessory mounting points, so you can mount like wireless chargers, camera holders or smartphone holders and other things. So that's cool. But yeah, I think the interior otherwise is very basic. So Dacia is positioned as Renault's entry-level brand, very price conscious, and they have some soft touch materials, but a lot of the center console and the door trims are all hard pack materials, so not the last word in luxury or by any means. Yeah, Sam, have any final comment on this car? What do you think the Australian pricing would be if they wanted to make it competitive, if they decide to sell it in
Probably around the $40,000
yeah,
because now we're seeing the BYD CL6 Touring. Let me have a
yeah,
quick
the
check.
plug-in hybrid,
The
yeah.
plug-in hybrid, yeah. So the CL6 Touring, correct, yeah. So I'd be probably looking at that more closely as well. Probably
Mm,
a slightly more premium interior than this,
yeah,
and yeah. Oh, that's 40,000 actually. So
yeah,
that is 40,000, or actually 44,000 after on road. So that's actually slightly pricey, but it would have a more premium interior than this car.
yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, regardless, I think if it's, I mean, I hope they sell it here and it'll be cool because I love the design. So I'd love to see it on Australian roads. But yeah, I think this is going to probably be a bit of a niche seller because just the people aren't that interested in buying wagons, unfortunately. And it's not, yeah, it's just not the most premium interior either. Like it's cool if you really want to go off road all the time and stuff, but otherwise you can find more comfortable cars with with more features and technology and so on elsewhere. So yeah. All right. Look, I think we might end it there for this week's episode of the Hook Turn podcast. So, once again, thank you very much for listening to us. Thank you to our new Vietnamese listeners. We hope you stay with us. I'm hoping that just wasn't a temporary random blip. And we do actually have a audience in Vietnam for whatever reason. But yeah, please remember to like and subscribe. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all of the major podcasting platforms, and we'll talk to you next week. Thank you. Bye.